Welcome to While We Were Distracted, the podcast where we explore topics that often get overshadowed in the rush of daily life.
Okay, so we've got this document, and honestly, it's wild. It's like reading a spy novel, but it's all real. CIA, a lie that just spiraled totally out of control, and how it ended up shaping how we think about one of history's biggest mysteries, the Kennedy assassination.
You know, what really gets me about this whole thing, this lie, as you called it, is how much it shows just how powerful misinformation can be, especially when you're talking about something as emotionally charged as Kennedy's assassination.
Yeah, no kidding. We're talking 1967. The Warren Report, the official investigation into JFK's assassination. It's out there, but not everyone's convinced.
A lot of people weren't. If anything, the Warren Report just made things seem even more suspicious, like it raised more questions than it answered. And that's where Jim Garrison comes in. He was the New Orleans district attorney at the time.
And Garrison, he was not one to back down from a challenge, right?
Yeah.
What was it about this case, this assassination, that made him want to launch his own investigation?
It seemed like Garrison was pretty sure the Warren Report was incomplete at best, maybe even a cover-up at worst. He wanted to find out what really happened, the truth as he saw it. So he turns his attention to Clay Shaw. He was a well-known businessman in New Orleans. Garrison accuses him of being part of the assassination plot.
And that arresting Clay Shaw, that's what set off alarms all the way over at CIA headquarters. Why? What was the connection?
Turns out Shaw had a past connection with the CIA.
Okay, so what was the connection? Was Shaw some kind of secret agent?
Not quite. It's a connection that actually ended years before the assassination. It's something that often gets overlooked when people talk about all these conspiracy theories. See, back during the Cold War, the CIA had this thing called the Domestic Contact Service, DCS for short.
Right, the DCS. They were all about gathering intelligence.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like those spy movies, right?
Not at all. It was more about getting insights, The CIA wanted to know anything they could about what was going on in the world, especially with the Soviet Union and their allies. They needed Americans who traveled internationally, especially anyone who went behind the Iron Curtain, to tell them what they saw, what they heard.
So someone like Clay Shaw, an international businessman, spoke Spanish, did business all over.
Yeah.
He would have been valuable to the CIA.
Exactly. And we know from declassified documents that he gave them reports on a whole bunch of stuff. Everything from what things were like in Czechoslovakia after the war to how the economy was doing in South America. They thought he had good insights, the CIA, but again, this was all before 1956, long before Kennedy was assassinated.
So when Garrison made this big public arrest, started making accusations, you could bet the CIA was paying attention.
For sure. They knew Shaw had given them information in the past, but they also knew it had nothing to do with Kennedy's assassination. It was years before. But how do you come out and say that, Even acknowledging it could make them look guilty.
Especially with everyone already so suspicious about everything surrounding the assassination. It's a tough spot for the CIA.
Yeah, they're in a bind. And what happens next just makes things a whole lot more complicated. An Italian newspaper, Sera, comes into the picture. This seemingly insignificant newspaper becomes a catalyst for decades of conspiracy theories.
This is where things take a sharp turn. We're talking about a story that was completely made up, a blatant lie, but it had huge consequences.
So Sera, they come out with this bombshell article. And they're not just saying Shaw gave a few reports to the CIA. They're saying he was a major player, like he was involved with some secret CIA front organization doing all kinds of shady stuff.
So they took what they knew, or what they thought they knew, about Shaw's past and just completely ran with it.
Exactly. And the timing, you couldn't have scripted it better. Remember, this is right after the whole Rampart scandal blew up,
Right.
Where it came out that the CIA was secretly funding all these organizations. People already didn't trust the CIA.
So everyone's already primed to believe the worst about the CIA, and then this article drops. Seemed to confirm everything they were afraid of. What did Garrison make of all this?
Oh, he loved it. Garrison took this Sera article and ran with it. This was it. This was the proof he needed to show that Clay Shaw was connected to the CIA and the whole assassination was part of a massive conspiracy.
And he didn't exactly keep it to himself, did he? He starts going public, dropping hints about the CIA being involved.
Right. Which puts the CIA in a really, really tough spot. They can't exactly come out and say, well, yeah, Shaw gave us some info a while back, but it was nothing major, and it was years before the assassination.
Because then it just looks like they're trying to downplay their connection to Shaw, like they're hiding something.
Exactly. They're damned if they do, damned if they don't. It seems like the only thing they can do is stay quiet. But of course, everyone knows that saying, silence speaks volumes. And it all leads to one of the most insane trials in American history.
The trial of Clay Shaw. This wasn't just a local New Orleans thing anymore. This was national news.
It became this huge clash of narratives. You've got the official story, the Warren Report, and then you've got Garrison's theory, this idea of a massive, shadowy conspiracy. And right in the middle of it all is this lie, this made-up connection between Clay Shaw and some CIA front.
And here's the really interesting part, and this is something that always gets me, Garrison. When they're actually in court, he never tries to make the CIA connection officially.
It does make you wonder. Maybe he realized that the whole CIA thing was too much of a stretch, that it wouldn't hold up in court, but it didn't really matter. The damage was done.
Because even if it wasn't admissible evidence, the idea was already out there. People had already made up their minds.
Totally. And you can't underestimate the power of a good story, especially one that plays on people's fears. Even though Shaw was acquitted, that seed of doubt was planted.
And even though Garrison lost the case, he came out of it looking, well, not so bad. He even had more support than before in some ways. He became this symbol of fighting the system.
Yeah, and he kept at it.
So the trial ends, but that's not the end of the story, is it? Garrison, he comes out of it, and people still believe him. Some people even think more highly of him after the trial. He's like this hero, fighting against the man.
Right. And he keeps going with it. Writes a book, does interviews, becomes a big name in the conspiracy world. And that whole thing about the CIA being involved in the assassination, all based on that lie in Péji Sera, people are eating it up.
Like a fire that just won't go out. The more people talk about it, the more it spreads. Distrust in the government, the media. Nobody believes the official story anymore.
And the CIA doesn't help themselves. They're stuck. They know anything they say can and will be used against them, so what can they do? They stay quiet.
Which just makes people even more suspicious.
Of course. It's a classic example of how disinformation works, especially when you're dealing with something that makes people anxious, something where they desperately want an answer that makes sense to them, even if it's not the official story.
And this is where it gets really interesting, don't you think? Because here we are, all these years later, and we're still seeing this. It's everywhere, right? Information, misinformation. It's almost impossible to tell what's real anymore.
Yeah, it's like this case, this whole Shaw thing, it's like a warning for us today. Think about it. Every day we're bombarded with information from every direction. And a lot of it is designed to make us feel a certain way, to manipulate us, not to tell us the truth.
So how do we know what to believe? Seriously, how do we figure out what's true and what's not when we're dealing with all this stuff?
It starts with asking questions. We can't just accept everything we see and hear. We've got to think critically, Who's telling me this? Why are they telling me this? Do they have an agenda? Are they using reliable sources?
So it's like we have to be detectives. We can't just take things at face value.
That's it. Look for clues, consider different angles, do your own research, and be careful about information that seems a little too good to be true, something that just happens to confirm everything you already believe.
Because it's easy to get stuck in our own little bubbles, isn't it? We surround ourselves with people who agree with us. We only read news that confirms our biases.
It happens to the best of us, but we have to be willing to listen to other perspectives, even if we don't like them, even if they make us uncomfortable. That's how we learn and grow and start to see the world in a more complete way.
So we started with this crazy story about a lie in an Italian newspaper, and now it feels like we're talking about how to survive in the digital age.
And that's the thing. This isn't just ancient history. This story, it reminds us how powerful information and misinformation can be. And it reminds us that we have to be careful, we have to be critical, we have to keep asking questions.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's been quite a deep dive, that's for sure. We started with a lie and ended up with a whole toolkit for navigating the world of information. It's up to all of us to be careful about what we believe and what we share. Until next time, stay curious and keep asking those questions.
Don't forget to like and subscribe for the next episode on While We Were Distracted.